And we're very fortunate to have Deepika and Nagabhushan of the Clean Air Task Force to lead us through this modeling. Deepika is a very talented analyst and also very intelligent working on policy positions. She's been working in California to have CO2 reductions from carbon capture accepted under that state's developing rules, which is very important and very difficult work, and so we appreciate Deepika's contributions to that. But the thing that you really need to know about Deepika, the most important thing is that she and her husband are actually working on a sci-fi screenplay. So we're going to look for that, and we'll let you know when that one comes out. So Deepika, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you. I had to miss a meeting with Christopher Nolan to be here, so I really appreciate the attention. Good morning, everybody. I have 5 minutes, so I'll be pretty quick, and I'll jump right into the into describing the work that I'm doing. So we work with Charles River Associates, an international economic consulting firm, to model using their North American Energy and Environment Model. It's called NEEM for short. To test the impact of 45Q on the deployment of carbon capture in the U.S. power sector. And without going into much detail, I'll just say a little bit about NEEM. It's the model that typically they use for their utility clients to help them make long-term planning decisions. And the way that the model works is that it works to find the least cost pathway to meeting the load growth. So I'll avoid going into a lot of the detail in terms of the assumptions that we use to set it up. I'll be happy to talk about it offline. Jeff Brown here has been so generous to spend hours and hours to help us figure out how to model 45Q in this project. So he also could be part of the conversation offline. So let's just jump right into the results now that we found. There are 3 key things that I'd like for you to take away from this presentation. This is the first. 45Q is effective in deploying carbon capture in the US power sector. In the year 2030, what we found was that there were 54.2 million short tons of CO2 captured through carbon capture. And as you can see, the blue part represents coal retrofits, and the orange part, I know you can't see the numbers probably, but that's 45.9 million tons and then 8.2 million tons from gas retrofit. The important thing to remember is that all the carbon capture that is deployed on existing fossil-fired power generation. And all of the CO2 that is captured is stored through EOR. So in the model, we had we made there was an option for the model to choose either saline sequestration or EOR, and it mostly it always shows EOR. Next slide, please. And this is the same data in gigawatts, not in emissions. So basically in 2030, what we see is 10.8 gigawatts of generation capacity that has carbon controls on it. Again, no new builds; it's all retrofits, with coal retrofits being sort of the dominating source. I know we talked about Bill Brown mentioned, or I think it was Chris that mentioned, it'll be hard to make CCS happen on coal, but I just want to highlight that the commodity prices we used in this modeling was all recent, like all NYMEX strip. So it is an economic decision that the model made using the latest gas prices, which are really low. Next slide, please. This is the second takeaway for you. What we find is that the CCS deployment, when 45Q is applied, does not impact how much generation we get out of renewables. And I think this goes to Jonathan Pershing's message this morning about diversity in like we need all the tools. I think that this definitely shows that it's possible, and 45Q doesn't take away from the contribution we get from renewable energy. As you can see here on the left, the first blue bar is the base case where there's no 45Q. The second line is the one with 45Q. The share that the renewables, non-hydro renewables, share of electricity is the same. It's the same actually even for coal and natural gas, except with 45Q, you see a part of that electricity comes from units with carbon controls. So that's about 50 terawatt hours in case of coal and about 17 terawatt hours in case of natural gas. And the general share of electricity generation, the general source mix is very similar to the projections that you will see in AEO 2018 for 2030. So it's in the same ballpark. This is the final takeaway for you. This is a comparison of the IEA 2-degree scenario, which was built to sort of meet that emission limit, and it worked backwards to see what kind of technology will be required to meet that to meet that 2-degree goal. That's represented in the blue bars. Those blue bars are how much CO2 is captured from the US power sector in the IEA 2-degree scenario. The orange line is how much CO2 is captured in the US power sector when 45Q is applied on our NEEM model, which I just have to reiterate was not built to reduce emissions. It was just to see, it's just the least cost pathway to meet load growth. So as you can see, 45Q acts like a down payment towards meeting this goal. We get about halfway there in the year 2030. But an important thing to note is what is not on this slide. And what's not on this slide is the industrial CO2 that could be captured through carbon capture when 45Q is applied. NEEM is an electric power sector model, so it doesn't really account for industrial CCS, but in our assumptions, we had about 200 million tons of low-cost CO2 that were sort of eliminated from the EOR storage supply just so that we could isolate the impact on the power sector. So that's an assumption I would like for you to keep in mind while you look at this, but it just goes to show that 45Q is fundamental and that we need more kind of targeted incentives to get us closer to the goals that we have here. I'll be happy to take questions if now, or if possible now or later. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Deepika. That was modeling hot off the presses. Deepika and her colleagues have been working tirelessly for the past few weeks to actually finish this run and have it ready for the session today. So thank you, Deepika.